The boardroom felt colder than usual that morning, though maybe it was just the chill of betrayal seeping into my bones. I sat quietly at the massive oak table, watching my sister Victoria stand at the head of the room, basking in her moment of triumph. "As you can see," she said, gesturing to the documents being passed around, "Alexandra has graciously decided to step aside, transferring her shares to me for the good of the company. The board can now vote with full confidence on my appointment as CEO." My fingers clenched around my coffee cup as the board members nodded approvingly. None of them questioned the convenient timing, just 2 weeks after our father's death. None of them wondered why I would suddenly give up my birthright, my half of everything our father had built. And none of them noticed that my signature on those transfer documents wasn't quite right. My name is Alexandra Morgan, and at 34, I thought I understood how cruel family could be. But watching my sister steal everything our father had promised me, using forged documents and carefully crafted lies, I realized I'd underestimated her capacity for betrayal. "Alex," Victoria's voice cut through my thoughts, honey sweet but laced with venom. "Would you like to say a few words?" I met her eyes across the table, seeing the challenge there. She thought she had me cornered. After all, what could I say? That she forged my signature? That she'd somehow managed to doctor security footage to show me entering the building late one night to sign away my inheritance? That she'd spent months setting this up, waiting for our father to die so she could take everything? I could say all of that, but I wouldn't. Not yet. "Congratulations, Vic," I said instead, raising my coffee cup in a mock toast. "I'm sure you'll do great things." Her smile faltered slightly at my calm tone. She'd expected a fight, tears, accusations, anything but this quiet acceptance. What she didn't know was that I'd been watching her too, gathering my own evidence, building my own case. The video footage she doctored. I had the originals, the witnesses she paid off. I had their confessions, the offshore accounts where she'd been siphoning company funds. I had the paper trail. But most importantly, I had something she didn't even know existed, our father's real will. The board meeting concluded with a unanimous vote installing Victoria as CEO of Morgan Industries. As people filed out, offering their congratulations, I stayed seated, methodically stirring my now cold coffee. "I have to admit," Victoria said once we were alone, "you're taking this better than I expected." I looked up at her, studying the face that was so similar to mine yet somehow harder, colder. "What did you expect, Vic? A scene? Tears? You know me better than that." She perched on the edge of the table, her designer suit perfectly pressed, her manicure immaculate. "I know you're planning something, Alex. You always were Dad's little strategist. But let me save you some time. It's over. I've won. The documents are ironclad, the board is behind me and you. You're just a former shareholder with no power and no proof of anything." I stood slowly, gathering my things. "You're right about one thing, Vic. I am Dad's daughter. Remember that." Her laugh followed me out of the boardroom, confident and cruel. "Don't be dramatic, Alex. It's just business." But it wasn't just business. This was personal, and it had been from the start. Growing up, Victoria and I had been close, or so I thought. Being only 18 months apart, we'd shared everything. Clothes, secrets, dreams. But somewhere along the way, something had changed. Maybe it was when Dad started grooming me to take over the company, seeing in me the same head for strategy and innovation that had made him successful. Or maybe the rivalry had always been there, simmering beneath the surface of our sister bond, waiting for the right moment to explode. I drove home from the office in a daze, memories flooding back. The way Victoria had started undermining me in subtle ways over the past few years. The accidental leaks of sensitive information to competitors. The whispers to board members about my supposed instability. All leading up to this moment, this carefully orchestrated coup. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend and head of legal, Sarah Chin. "Just heard. You okay?" I pulled into my driveway before responding. "Come over. Bring wine." An hour later, Sarah sat across from me on my back porch, a glass of Merlot in hand. "So what's the plan?" she asked, knowing me well enough to know I wouldn't just roll over. I pulled out my laptop, opening a folder I'd labeled innocuously as family photos. "First," I said, turning the screen toward her, "look at this." Her eyes widened as she scrolled through document after document. Bank transfers, emails, security footage, And finally, a video file dated 3 days before my father's death. Is that? I nodded. Dad knew he was dying. He knew Victoria was planning something. So he made arrangements. The video showed my father, thin and pale but clear-eyed, sitting in his study. Alexandra, his voice crackled through the speakers. If you're watching this, then everything I feared has come to pass. Your sister, she's not who we thought she was. I've discovered things, terrible things, about what she's been doing with company funds. The real will is in the safe at the lake house. The combination is your birthday. Be careful, sweetheart. Victoria has more to lose than you know. Sarah let out a low whistle. Alex, this is huge. We need to go to the authorities. Not yet, I said, closing the laptop. Victoria's not just stealing the company. She's involved in something bigger. Those offshore accounts. They're connected to some very dangerous people. We need to understand exactly what we're dealing with before we make a move. And in the meantime, I took a sip of wine, thinking about Victoria's smug face in the boardroom. In the meantime, I play the grieving sister who lost her inheritance. I let her think she's won, and I watch. Sarah shook her head. She's going to get suspicious if you don't put up any fight at all. Oh, I'll fight, I said, a plan already forming, just not in the way she expects. The next few weeks were a masterclass in acting. I made just enough noise about the share transfer to seem legitimate. A strongly worded letter here, a tearful phone call there. Victoria handled each protest with practiced sympathy, always with witnesses present, always playing the role of the reasonable sister dealing with an emotional sibling. Meanwhile, I dug deeper. Every night after leaving the office, where I still technically held a minor executive position, I pieced together Victoria's real operation. The offshore accounts were just the beginning. She'd been using company resources to facilitate something much darker. Money laundering for a network of shell companies tied to organized crime. Our father had discovered it just before his death. His heart attack was starting to look less and less natural. One evening, about a month after Victoria's takeover, I was working late at the office, deliberately keeping my movements obvious. Right on schedule, Marcus, Victoria's head of security, appeared at my door. Ms. Morgan, he said stiffly, it's late. You should head home. I made a show of sighing heavily, shuffling papers on my desk. Just finishing up some reports, Marcus. I'll leave soon. He lingered in the doorway, exactly as I'd expected. Victoria had him watching me, making sure I didn't access anything important. Little did they know that I'd already gotten everything I needed. As I drove home that night, I noticed the black SUV following me, another one of Victoria's precautions. I smiled to myself, thinking of the real will safely hidden in my home's safe, of the evidence backed up on secure servers, of the plan slowly taking shape. Victoria thought she was being careful, but she'd made one crucial mistake. She underestimated just how much our father had taught me. The game was only beginning, and I was playing for keeps. The first sign that my plan was working came 3 months after Victoria's takeover. I was reviewing quarterly reports in my downgraded office when Sarah burst in, her face flushed with excitement. They took the bait, she whispered, closing the door behind her. The SEC just opened a preliminary investigation into those anonymous tips about accounting irregularities. I kept my expression neutral, aware of the cameras Victoria had installed in every office. That's concerning, I said loudly enough to be picked up. I hope it doesn't affect our stock price. Sarah caught on immediately, putting on a worried face. Should we inform the CEO? I'm sure Victoria already knows, I replied, turning back to my paperwork. She has everything under control. The seeds I'd planted were starting to sprout. Those anonymous tips to the SEC had been carefully crafted, just enough to trigger an investigation, but not enough to reveal the full scope of Victoria's crimes. It was the first move in a long game. Later that day, Victoria summoned me to her office, our father's old office, which she'd redecorated in stark modern furniture that would have made him cringe. Interesting development with the SEC, she said, studying me over her sleek glass desk. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? I met her gaze steadily. Why would I? I signed away my shares, remember? The company's financial health isn't my concern anymore. Right, she drawled, leaning back in her chair. And I'm sure it's just coincidence that these allegations surface right after you lose your inheritance. I shrugged. Sounds like someone's looking out for the company's best interests. Isn't that what you always say you're doing? Her eyes narrowed at my tone, but before she could respond, her phone buzzed. The look that crossed her face as she read the message was almost worth everything I'd been through, pure, unfiltered panic. Get out, she snapped. And Alex, stay out of things you don't understand. I was halfway to the door when I turned back. Oh, by the way, how are those offshore accounts doing? The ones in the Cayman Islands? Dad always said diversification was important. The color drained from her face. What did you say? Nothing. I smiled innocently, just remembering Dad's business advice. He taught us so much, didn't he? I left her office knowing I had struck a nerve. Victoria would be checking those accounts immediately, which meant she'd soon discover the discrepancies I'd carefully planted, traces leading to one of her most trusted associates, Marcus. The next few weeks were a carefully orchestrated dance. Victoria grew increasingly paranoid, checking and double-checking her network of fraudulent accounts. She started suspecting her own people exactly as I'd planned. Marcus was the first to crack. I made sure to be working late one night when he came to my office, closing the door behind him. "We need to talk," he said, his usual confidence replaced by nervous energy. "About your sister." I looked up slowly. "I'm not sure what I could tell you about Victoria that you don't already know. You're her head of security, after all." He glanced at the cameras, then slid a piece of paper across my desk. "Not here. Tomorrow, this address. Come alone." The paper had an address for a coffee shop across town. I pocketed it without comment, but inside, my heart was racing. Everything was falling into place. The next morning, I arrived at the coffee shop early, choosing a seat with a clear view of both entrances. Marcus showed up exactly on time, looking like he hadn't slept. "Your sister," he said without preamble, "is going to get us all killed." I took a sip of my coffee. "What makes you say that?" "Don't play dumb," he hissed. "The money laundering, the connections to the Kovic family, the way your father really died, you know about all of it, don't you?" I set down my cup carefully. "Why don't you tell me your version, Marcus? Start with the night my father died." He broke. For the next hour, Marcus laid out everything. How Victoria had been working with the Kovic crime family for years, using Morgan Industries to clean their money. How her father had discovered the truth and confronted her. How she'd arranged for him to have an accident with his heart medication. "She's cleaning house now," Marcus finished, running a hand through his hair. "People are disappearing. I think I'm next." I pulled out my phone, setting it on the table. "Say that again, Marcus. All of it. And this time, let's make sure it's recorded properly." His eyes widened as understanding dawned. You planned this?" "Let's just say I've been planning a lot of things," I replied, pressing record. Now from the beginning. By that evening, I had everything I needed. Marcus's confession, combined with the evidence I'd been gathering in our father's video, created an ironclad case. But I wasn't done yet. I waited 3 more days, watching Victoria unravel further as more discrepancies appeared in her accounts. Then I made my move. It was late, most of the office had cleared out, when I walked into her office unannounced. She was on the phone, her voice sharp with barely controlled panic. "I don't care what it takes," she was saying. "Find out who's accessing those accounts and shut them down." "That would be me," I said loudly enough for the person on the other end to hear. Victoria's head snapped up. "I'll call you back," she said into the phone before slamming it down. "What did you say?" I sat down across from her, pulling out a thick folder. "You know, Vic, Dad always said your biggest weakness was your ego. You're so convinced of your own brilliance that you never stop to consider someone might be smarter than you." Her hand inched toward her desk drawer, where she kept her gun. I knew. "What are you talking about?" "The offshore accounts. I've been tracking them for months. The security footage you doctored. I have the originals. Marcus's confession about Dad's death, recorded this morning. I started laying out documents one by one. But most importantly, I have this." I pulled out our father's real will, the one from the lake house safe. "That's impossible," she whispered. "I destroyed it." "You destroyed a copy," I corrected her. "Did you really think Dad wouldn't have a backup plan? Did you wonder why I gave in so easily when you took over?" She lunged for the drawer, but I was faster. "I wouldn't," I said calmly. "The FBI is already in the building. So are the SEC investigators and the police. Did you really think I'd come here without backup? As if on cue, we heard commotion in the hallway. Victoria's face crumpled as reality set in. Why? She asked as footsteps approached her office. Why did you wait so long? I stood up, gathering my evidence, because I needed to understand everything. The money laundering, the connections to organized crime, Dad's death, all of it. You taught me that, Vic. Always have all the facts before you make your move. The door burst open as federal agents flooded in. Victoria didn't resist as they read her rights, her eyes never leaving my face as they led her away. The aftermath was chaotic but controlled. Victoria and her conspirators were arrested. The board convened an emergency meeting where I presented the real will and evidence of my sister's crimes. Within days, I was reinstated as CEO. Months later, I sat in my father's office, my office now, looking at the last family photo we'd taken together. Victoria had just been sentenced to 20 years for her role in our father's death and the money laundering operation. Sarah knocked on my door, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Rough day. I took one of the cups, breathing in the familiar aroma, just thinking about how different things could have been if Victoria had just been patient. Dad always planned to give her a significant role in the company. She didn't have to steal it. Some people can't see past their own ambition, Sarah said, sitting down across from me. Your father would be proud of how you handled this. I touched the photo gently. He taught me well. Strategy isn't about making a first move. I quoted, remembering his words. It's about making the right move at the right time. Looking out over the city skyline from my office window, I felt a sense of peace settling over me. Victoria had tried to steal my inheritance, my legacy, even my father's memory. But in the end, justice had prevailed. Not through violence or quick revenge, but through patience, strategy, and the careful application of truth. Dad would definitely have approved of that.